Excellent. Well, welcome everybody. My name's Kelly Coster. I'm the Cascade chapter president for ACT, and I'm joined here today by Tracy McPhail from the Chesapeake chapter. And this is the second in our parking series webinars, this one on parking policies. And we're delighted today that we have Marina and Olivia to speak about how they've been implementing parking policies in the DC region and the Seattle region. But before I introduce our two speakers, just a couple housekeeping items. One, this is a meeting. It's not a webinar, so you do have to mute yourself, but you can also unmute yourself to ask questions when we get to that part of the Q&A. So feel free to do that. If you have questions that you want to jot down as we go, just put those in the chat. There's no Q&A button. So put those in the chat and we'll get to them at the end. And let's see, anything else? Oh, we will record this. So if anyone wants to catch it later, we can share it. And then last here, I want to pass it to Elizabeth from ACT National, and she'll give a few updates, and then we'll introduce our speakers. Go ahead, Elizabeth.
Great. Thanks, Kelly. Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining again today on this joint chapter series. This is really awesome to see this going on. Just a couple of things. A reminder, first of all, that next week is TDM week. That is a week where we're trying to get people to share stories about TDM. It's all in support of the More Through TDM Act. I'll put a link in the chat in a little bit for some more information for that if you haven't taken a look at it. And the other thing is we launched our new membership recruitment campaign yesterday. So this is very exciting. The membership committee has been hard at work getting this all worked out. There's 3 different components to it, 2 of which recognize you as individuals, and the third part recognizes the chapter. So I say this with 2 chapters on the call, but it's a little competitive with the chapters. But there will be, the goal is between May 1st and July 31st. We're hoping to recruit 30 new organizations or self-employed members. And if we reach that goal, ACT is going to donate $2,500 to a charitable transportation organization. And the chapter that has the most new members will be part of the decision-making process and selecting and presenting. So that's kind of exciting. There's also an opportunity for you as individuals to self-report how many people you may or may have recruited over the last year since last August. So there'll be an annual member of the year, and then there'll be an ongoing lifetime award. So those will be pins that you'll get and you'll be able to wear at the conferences and stuff like that. So I will also put a link to that page with the details in the chat at some point, but we're very excited about those. So, start promoting ACT and bringing people in, and a little competition for the chapters. And yep, that's about it. So thanks very much and enjoy the webinar.
Well, thank you, Elizabeth. I'm Tracy McPhail, like Kelly said, and I'm the events chair for the Chesapeake chapter. And I have the pleasure of introducing our second speaker, who is Marina Budimir from the District Department of Transportation, otherwise known as DDOT. Marina is a transportation planner for Washington, D.C., and manages DDOT's Transportation Demand Management Program, including Go DC Go, assisting with land use applications, policy and research, and various strategic plans and initiatives. Marina has over a decade of experience in TDM in both the private and public sectors, holds an MPA from American University, and is a certified public manager from George Washington University. As a committed public servant and longtime DC resident, Marina is passionate about creating opportunities for all to live a car-free lifestyle and enjoy the benefits of using sustainable transportation options. In her free time, Marina teaches safe cycling with the Washington Area Bicyclist Association and loves exploring the city with her 9-month-old. All right.
Excellent. And now I will introduce Olivia, who will actually present first. So Olivia is responsible for planning and implementing key aspects of Commute Seattle's transportation programs designed to reduce congestion, including the execution of the commute trip reduction and transportation management programs and consultative fee-for-service work. Olivia is originally from a small town outside of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and earned a BS in regional planning from Indiana University of Pennsylvania. Olivia later moved to America's bicycle capital, Portland, Oregon, to pursue a Master of Urban and Regional Planning at Portland State University and studied effects of zero parking in multi-family residential housing. After her studies and volunteering with many small, scrappy nonprofits, she found her passion to be breaking down barriers to public systems. So with that, we'll let Olivia get started and then Marina, and we'll have a Q&A at the end. So feel free to put your questions in the chat.
All right, thanks everyone. It's good to see some familiar faces. And thank you for that great introduction, Kelly. I'm really happy to be with you all here and to celebrate Commute Production's 30th birthday. So if you haven't heard in the invite, we've had our Commute Production policy here in the state of Washington for 30 years now. I'm a program manager here at Commute Seattle, and that is one of my key programs to work on, and with a great team of transportation specialists. And I feel really lucky to now have been with Commute Seattle for 3 years, which is about a 10th of the CTR Law's lifeline, or lifetime there, which I guess gives me the privilege to talk about it and to tell you all about it and to help spread the wealth of knowledge of what we're doing here in Seattle around getting more people out of their cars and more butts on bikes and more access to transportation options. So today I'm just going to give a bit of a background on the Commute Production policy, a basic 101. I'm going to talk about employer implementation of Commute Production programs at the employer workplaces, some monitoring of the program, a little bit about compliance, our program reach at large, who do we work with, what types of industries are participating in the Commute Production program, and then the impact. Where would we be without the Commute Production law here in the city of Seattle? And can everyone hear me okay? I'm trying to look at the chat box. Choppy, give me just 1 second, okay? Is that any better?
I think so. Say something again.
Hello?
Okay, yeah, that sounds better.
Okay, let me know throughout in the chat box. I've got it here. Thank you, I appreciate that. All right.
Thanks.
And all right, great. And so, sorry about that. Let me get back to my train of thought. So who is Commute Seattle at the end of the day? We are a transportation management association, and I'm also on the TMA Council for Act 2. And so if you're a participant in that or on the council, it's great to have you here. We are a public-private partnership at the end of the day, businesses and government working together around a central mission. And that really is to keep Seattle moving and thriving for all, and to get, again, more people accessing transportation options, get people out of their cars, reduce congestion, and improve the environment at the end of the day too. So a little bit of context to Seattle's TDM policy. What tools do we have in our toolbox? And we're really lucky here in the city of Seattle. We have an abundance of tools in our toolbox. And for me, I'm a land use planner. That's what my background is in, conveniently not in transportation. And so when I think about the different TDM policies that we have in the city of Seattle, I think about them as a building. And so we have employers that are inside of each building. We have the building itself that's affected by master use permit policies in the transportation management program. We have parking management that's happening underground. We have businesses that are smaller employers that are required here in Seattle to offer pre-tax commuter benefits. And then we have the Commute Production law that affects employers with 100 or more employees here in the state of Washington to take action around providing commute options and to take action around how their employees are getting to work and to reduce their impact on their workforce coming to Seattle. That's what we're going to focus on here today, but I just wanted to mention that it's not working alone. The Commute Production policy has a lot of other policies that complement it, that support it, and that there's a host of policies that we have here to leverage, which is really great. And so Commute Seattle is sort of like the Swiss Army knife inside of that toolbox, if you will. We're the entity to educate, communicate, convene, and consult with those businesses on their transportation benefits. We're thought generators, but we're also continually learning with the rest of you around the industry as it changes. TDM is relatively new, pretty in its infancies, and we're working to make it become more accessible and more equitable for all people as well. I'm really lucky to be on a great team of women in transportation, really specializing in all things commute. So I couldn't do this alone, and I definitely do not. These are my great team that work with over 500 different businesses here in the city of Seattle. So what is CTR, or commute trip reduction? The law itself is a statewide policy that local jurisdictions implement. And so it was passed in 1991, and it requires employers to work to reduce the number and length of drive alone trips. So the CTR law stems from the Washington Clean Air Act and Climate Action Plan to improve air quality, reduce congestion, and reduce the consumption of fossil fuels. And so at its core, it's meant to improve the quality of life and was developed out of the Clean Air Act, and that's where most of the funding comes from. So who's affected by the CTR law? I already touched on it a little bit. CTR employers that are affected by the law here in the state of Washington and the city of Seattle have 100 or more employees at the end of the day. They also are typically commuting between 6 and 9 a.m., 2 or more work days for at least 12 continuous months, and they are not independent contractors. And so those are some specifics about the policy itself and who the policy affects at the end of the day when it comes down to the end user. Really, when you think about it, we're looking at full-time employees that are employed by that employer of 100 or more employees. Just a particular kind of caveat, I guess, with the pandemic. Obviously, many employees are not arriving to work sites. And so you're affected by the CTR law if you're arriving at your work. So I'm Olivia, I'm arriving at work at 9 a.m. and the DSA, Downtown Seattle Association, has 100 or more employees. We're affected by the policy regardless of making that physical commute trip. And we can talk more about that in the Q&A session. I'm sure there will be questions. So the basic requirements of the law itself are pretty basic. You need a contact at your employer. You need to do a survey to be able to collect your drive alone rate and your mode split of how your employees are getting to work. That'll give you your drive alone rate mode split at the end of the day and see how it aligns to the goal. You're going to submit a program report on your facilities, how much parking you have, do you have bicycle parking, how do you communicate to employees, things like that. You're also required to inform employees at least 2 times per year about their transportation benefits and subsidies that are available to them as an employee of that employer. And then at the end of the day, you're exercising a good faith effort by collaborating with Commute Seattle and the city of Seattle on the implementation of the commute trip reduction law. And so how does this policy really translate to practice? When it comes to an employer implementing a commute trip reduction program for their employees, City Code does outline certain minimum elements to be included in their employee transportation programs. So first and foremost, employers need to talk to their employees about commuting. Bottom line, communicate early, communicate often about your transportation benefits. Set the tone that the culture is to talk about commuting. Transportation is another benefit alongside your health coverage, so on and so forth. So that's the basics. You must distribute that transportation information twice a year and also to your new hires when they're brought into the company. Next, the CTR law has 3 different categories. Employers need to select at least 2 strategies from each category in their employee transportation program. Those categories are employee transportation amenities, subsidies and modal support, like your transit pass subsidy, for example, or a free transit pass provided by your employer, and then parking management. And so for the theme of today's webinar, we have an entire category of strategies that are dedicated to CTR around parking policy. I think we're all pretty well aware that if you provide hundreds of carrots and you don't have a really strong stick, you're probably not going to make a great amount of behavior change, or behavior change that has good endurance, that lasts a long time. So let's talk about a little bit about those different categories. Like I said, you got to offer amenities, or at least 2 strategies for each of these categories. And the policy really builds out what those are and gives you some options and sort of like a menu, if you will, of what you can offer in your, to your employers around these different categories. Real-time information or transit screens, flex work is a big one, and making those policies, whether or not it's compressed work weeks, remote work, alternative flex arrangements of I can arrive at 10 a.m. versus 9 a.m. or maybe I can arrive and go to work at many different locations rather than just having a home base. Employee shuttles, guaranteed ride home. If you're in an emergency, you got to pick a kid up at school, you got a dog sick, something, whatever, you have that in your back pocket and that kind of peace of mind to be able to get home if you've taken the bus to work or used a van pool. Rideshare matching and carpool matching and for van pool. We're lucky here in the state of Washington to have a statewide carpool matching platform called Rideshare Online, as well as many other kind of employer managed or commute management platforms like Loom. And then a big one here, and something that I might harp on a little bit throughout my presentation, is just bicycle parking, showers, lockers, changing areas, and the abundance of such, and making those open and available to your employees, especially in those office reopening and return to work plans. Category B is going to be is sort of my favorite group of the categories, in that it really offers really great incentives to your employees around transportation options. It balances the need for charging for parking and for making that a daily decision as well. These might be here in Washington or in the Puget Sound area. We have Orca, which manages a host of different transit agency providers with one sole card, which is really awesome. So you don't need 6 different cards in your wallets to tap on. And we have great employer subsidy programs called Orca for Business that make it really easy for an employer to offer transit passes subsidized for all of their employees or just a select pool of their employees. Subsidizing carpool and van pool. Van pool here in the state of Washington is public transportation. And so if you're providing that employer transit pass, you're also going to be giving them an a la carte van pool program as well. Procuring maybe a third-party van pool like Enterprise or Commute with Enterprise. And then again, offering those pre-tax commuter benefits, which are now a requirement and a bare minimum here in the city of Seattle for employers with 20 or more employees. Category B, or category C, I'm sorry, parking management. Bare bones in this, they talked a lot about in the last webinar around parking policies, part 1, around charging market rate for parking, but also making that a daily parking rate rather than a monthly parking rate. You need that decision to be daily and not something that I've bought into for an entire month or even worse for an entire year. You're making that decision really easy if you've already made your mind up and you've already entered your information, to be deducted from your paycheck. You don't see that happening every day. So you need that to be a pain point really at the end of the day, to have daily parking in place and to make it really top of mind for those employees when they're getting to the building and they're driving, they're paying a daily rate for that parking. Preferential parking and or reduced charges for HOV or for access to the bicycle or locker rooms as well. Parking cash out is pretty big. Here in Seattle, we have a number of employers in the commuter production program that pay people for not driving, literally cash in your pocket for taking a commute option to get to work that day. Many employers are working to have telework work into that program as well now. And finally, the priority parking for car share vehicles. Here we have Gig Car Share in the Seattle area. I know there's some others out there in market as well, are also providing company-owned vehicles that are hopefully 100% electric as well. And so let's talk a little bit about enforcement and compliance. And so the CTR law is built on drive alone rates and reducing those over time. And we have benchmarks set out into 2030 around what those drive alone rates need to be for different areas around the city. And so the program has, we're tracking drive alone rates and we have a goal here. Here you see a City of Seattle site, Seattle Municipal Tower here in downtown Seattle. They have an 11.5 drive alone rate for 2019, their last survey. The goal for them is 17%. So they're meeting their goal. And we also articulate and give their data back to them here in this nice commute map and as well give them a mode split as well. So the program is based on a good faith effort. So you're completing your survey, you have a contact identified, you're doing that program report about your facilities. And if you're not meeting your drive alone rate goal, it's okay because it's a good faith effort. But Commute Seattle is going to be the entity that helps you refine your strategies, institutes best practices there, and really pushes you to meet that goal and to come in compliance with the program. The program, CTR law does have the teeth to issue $250 a day for fines. It's not something that we have pursued in the past, and I can talk more about that in a few. And so really we're here, Commute Seattle, to build relationships with those businesses. We're here to help you navigate the commute to production law, offer peer-to-peer comparisons, compare you to your government sector peers, compare you to the people that are next door. What are they offering? How can you be more competitive? How can you increase your retainment and talent recruitment? And we're always here to give you the data back. And so through the CTR law, we do collect a lot of data about these different workplaces and businesses, but we are here to give it back to you, to visualize it in a way that makes sense, to compare that data and provide some technical support to these businesses that don't have that in-house. And so we have a tool really individualized for each of our employers in the program. They log on with a unique access code and they can see whether or not it's their commute data or their program report data and how that compares to their industry and network peers. So who are we working with? What's the program reach for the commute to production policy and program here in the city of Seattle? We work with about 275 of Seattle's largest employers, and 20 of those voluntarily participate in the program because they see it as a great value add to their sustainability program already. And so they might not be affected. They don't have that 100 or more employees, but they still want to participate because they see value in what we do and what Commute Seattle does and how we can help. Here you'll see just a breakdown of the industry. It might be typical to other cities, but for Seattle, we have a lot of tech. It's our definitely top industry, followed by healthcare and hospitals, and close third there with the government sector. So where would we be without the commute to production law? I like to think that we would have a lot more traffic. We would be in a worse place without the commute to production policy. Seattle has had an enormous amount of growth in the last 10 years. We've increased, I'm trying to look here at the chart, probably close to 100,000 people over the last 10 years, over the last decade or so. And we could have had all of those people be in their cars and drive. But you can see here that as the drive alone rate decreases and our population increases, we're still getting people out of their cars and into transportation options. And how do we do that? Overwhelmingly, we get people in transit. And I know you're probably like, oh boy, COVID, pandemic, how can we make this start to come to fruition? And we'll talk a little bit more about that probably in the Q&A, but we're here in Seattle, we had an overwhelmingly voter-approved tax measure to do a tax increase to provide more transit and to get school-age kids still on the bus, public transportation here during COVID, which is really positive signs that Seattleites are ready to get back on the bus. We overwhelmingly support it. We just need to build the confidence and build the trust in the system and make sure riders know what to expect after they haven't commuted for a year. But here you can see that we heavily lean on transit, but also telework was really going up even before the pandemic. This is just a basic mode split, kind of elaborating on that a little bit too. I'm gonna just jump quickly though to talk a little bit about telework. And so I like to think that CTR really has helped us prepare for this mandatory work from home as well. We were already seeing a great increase in telework in our last survey cycle in 2019. In addition, more and more people are able to use multiple modes per week to be able to get where they're going. And so they're multimodal commuters, which is really going to help us as we go back to work. As you go back, you're going to try something one day and probably try something different the next day. In Seattle, we've already been doing that for some time. It's a part of our culture and a part of the norm. And so I'm just going to run through pretty quickly on some different ways that the program report comes to fruition and how the impact trickles down into the employer level. And so you remember early on that the basics of the program are to communicate the program. Overwhelmingly, we have employers that communicate out the program early and often. We get about a 30%, 40% open rate to our e-blast that goes out every week to our ETCs. They're really engaged in the program and they know that Commute Seattle is here to help and that we're a good entity to turn to whenever they have questions. Historically, employees were working remotely. You can see the consistent increase here in the last program report data from 2016 to 2020 as well. And so we're working with employers right now to be able to talk to them if you didn't have a permanent telework policy in place before or flex work policy in place before, how can we institute one now for your workplace so that you don't miss this opportunity and this great work from home policy that does work for some of your employees. Again, overwhelmingly with the kind of subsidy and modal supports, roughly 3 out of 4 CTR worksites that are in the program provide a transit subsidy. 75% of folks are providing some sort of employer paid transit pass for their employees. That's really unique and really awesome as well. And it's something that, again, you'll see in that mode split. We wouldn't have that transit pass or that transit ridership in transit mode split without the great employer provided transit passes. Again, vanpool has been increasing over time as well. And the awareness of vanpool overwhelmingly has been increasing over time as well. And then just to talk a little bit about the benefits of active commuting. 45% of companies responded to our latest program report data collection that they have some sort of secure bike storage. Another 35% have lockers, and another about 40% have the showers in place for people to use those. This number really needs to grow even more so though than it is right now to be able to support the people that have bought a bike, that got a bike out of their garage, and really the surge in people on bikes that we've seen in the last year and a half. And again, the single most effective way though to reduce the drive alone rate at the workplace is to move away from monthly parking passes. It really prompts the staff to think, do I need to drive today? It allows for more flexible schedules. It allows you to arrive not at that early bird rate. And you can see here that roughly 4 out of 10 workplaces do not offer free parking to their employees at all, which is, you know, what needs to happen to be able to encourage people to use that employer provided transit pass subsidy that I talked about before. And so imagine Seattle's growth without any carrots or sticks to leverage the behavior change. I think we would be in a worse place overall. We would have 25,000 more cars on Seattle streets any given day, which is not what we need. We have no place to store those for parking, no place to put them on the streets. We need more people and transportation options. And so with that, happy 30 years of CTR. I really hope you enjoyed my presentation. And if you have questions, I'd love to talk to you more. And my contact information is here if you'd like to reach me offline.
Great. Thank you so much, Olivia. Thank you for your presentation. And now we're going to turn it over to Marina.
Hello, can you hear me?
We can.
Excellent. Oops. Okay, hi everyone. Oh, I'm sorry about that. Okay, can you see me?
We can.
Excellent. Hi everyone, I'm really happy to be here with you this afternoon to talk a little bit more about TDM policies in Washington, DC. I'll just briefly highlight the district's TDM program and then go a little more into detail on the 2 TDM related policies that we have right now. So our district TDM program consists of 4 core areas: our marketing and outreach through Go DC Go, which is our sustainable transportation brand to raise awareness of all our wonderful facilities and transit options in the city. And I have to give a shout out to our amazing contractors, Foursquare ITP, Clark Concepts, and Steer for really bringing this program to the next level and creating a very impactful program for us. So thank you. Policy, which I will talk about next, and research is supported by regional universities through grants and internships right now. And finally, development review, where we have an opportunity to provide TDM comments on some of the development applications that come through DDOT and ensuring that new buildings in the city have robust TDM plans and strategies in place.
Rita, are you sharing your screen?
Yes, am I not?
No, we're not seeing it. I know you have pretty slides. We want to see them.
Sorry about that.
Okay. There we go. Okay. There we go. Perfect.
Okay, wonderful. So the first law was passed as part of the sustainable, I'm like, wait, what is the thing called again? Sustainable DC Omnibus Amendment Act of 2014, which was which had a lot of different sustainability goals and programs for the city. And a provision within that was to reduce single occupancy vehicle travel by encouraging transit benefits. And this is your typical like TDM ordinance, I suppose, to expand access to pre-tax commuter benefits. And employers have 3 options to comply with this law. Option 1 is just having pre-tax benefits through payroll deduction and allowing employees to put money aside for transit, van pooling, and biking. And I just want to mention that biking was included as part of the law, but since it was paused on the federal level, that is obviously no longer an option in the law either. The second option was just a flat out direct subsidy or benefit to employees, again, for public transit or van pooling. And the third option under this law is to provide a free shuttle or van pool between the local transit hub and the work site, or to the employer's work site. This law and the other law are applicable to employers with 20 or more employees. And I've included some links here to the legislation and resources that GoDC Go put together to educate employers about these requirements. And they go quite into detail about implementing each of these options. And you can find how to do that step by step. And our new law, the Transportation Benefits Equity Amendment Act, was just passed last year. And we're really excited about this because it paves the way to help employers that offer free parking in the city not to do that and expand access to other transportation options instead. Similar to the first law, this law also has 3 ways to comply with this requirement. The first one is a clean air transportation fringe benefit, and this is basically the parking cash out option. Under this option, employers who offer free or subsidized parking to their employees have to offer the equivalent in benefits to employees who do not take advantage of the free and subsidized parking. And they can do a combination of things there. For example, they can give employees money toward public transit use, increase their health plan coverage, or contribute to compensation. But ultimately, the benefit has to equal in the value that the employees who are receiving the free parking or subsidized parking receive as well. The second option is the clean air transportation compliance fee. And this is for employers who wish to kind of bypass this requirement and want to retain their free and subsidized parking for employees. In that case, they will need to contribute a $100 fee per employee who's receiving the parking benefit per day. And this can, really add up depending on how many parking spaces you have. And from talking to colleagues across the country, I know that in some places, employers actually choose this option and they simply just pay the fee. So we're interested to see what happens here and how this portion plays out. And finally, employers can also do a transportation demand management plan to become compliant with this law. If they choose this route, they need to achieve a 75% non-SOV mode share for their site. And they basically have to reduce their SOV travel by about 10% every year until they achieve that goal. And DDOT will work with them directly to help develop that plan and make sure that we're providing the resources and the support needed to achieve their SOE split. And I should also mention that the 75% non-SOE mode share is the district-wide goal for our sustainability plan that we are hoping to achieve by 2032. Coming up. It's also noteworthy to say that the law is not applicable to employers who own the parking. So for example, universities and hospitals that have large parking structures are not required to comply with this law for those parking structures, but they do have to implement this law for any new building that will have parking. It's also not applicable to employers who have a current or existing campus plan. However, the new campus plans will include this provision. There will be a lot of reporting requirements for this law, so there definitely, there's an opportunity to really figure out kind of what's going on and what the compliance situation is. Starting later this year, and then every 2 years after that, employers will be required to complete an online form, most likely, that lets us know what their benefits are and how many employees are participating. And then starting next year, DDOT is going to be reporting the aggregate data and compliance and any remediating actions that we need to take for non-compliant employers. And then every 2 years after that. Currently, we are in the implementation phase for this law because it's very new, as I mentioned earlier. Right now, we are finalizing the rulemaking document and working out the final kinks and legal questions, and creating all of the educational materials for employers, various handouts, dedicated web pages, developing a marketing campaign with our Go DC Go team, and various other kind of administrative tasks to put everything in place so that we can be operational and start fielding employer inquiries in June this year. DDOT has been tasked with enforcing this law. We're also collecting baseline data to better understand the universe of employers. We know from our other work that most employers in the district are actually around 50 employees or so, and that means that most employers in the district will need to comply with obviously the first iteration and then this amendment as well, which is really wonderful. And again, we just continue working with Go DC Go to create all of the educational materials and make sure that we are communicating the complexities and compliance requirements adequately. Obviously, our goal with the impact here is to affect mode shift, and we really want to reduce parking in the city and help people switch from driving to taking transit, biking, and walking. And we're very proud that the district has more than 150 miles of bike lanes and trails that people can use. Obviously, we have a world-class metro system, a massive bus network, and this kind of paves the way for that. Of course, this law will also reduce pollution by getting people out of cars and drive economic growth, especially for the downtown area, as people will be able to have more touch points with our downtown and other areas of the city by walking and biking and taking transit as opposed to driving in and out of the city. Ultimately, the aggregate effect of the first law and the second policy, as well as with our marketing and outreach work, will help us to really increase access to transportation benefits, reduce parking demand, and empower individuals, commuters, visitors, everyone to make more sustainable transportation choices. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Marina and Olivia, both for your presentations. I think we had one question in the chat that came in for Marina. Is the DC parking fee tax deductible for businesses? That may be a reason why they are just paying for it.
The parking fee, do you mean like the parking cash out?
I believe that's what Christy was talking about, yes.
You said that employers had to pay $100 per employee receiving parking benefits per day. And you also said that some employers just going ahead and paying for that, even though it is kind of expensive. I was wondering, is that something that they could probably write off? Because if it is, it's probably why they're just paying for it up front.
That's a good question. I don't think I have the answer right now for you. I will need to check with our legal, but I haven't heard anything about it being tax deductible. So my inclination would be to say probably not, but not sure. Thanks for the question.
Thank you.
I actually have a question for Olivia. With the parking management piece of your program, what do people choose to most, for those options? What do they choose most?
Most people choose to charge for parking first and foremost. That's the top one. The second one would be the daily parking. I would say the parking cash out is picking up some momentum. I hope that it's irreversible. I think there's been some friendly competition around who has the best parking cash out program here in Seattle, who puts the most money in pocket. So I expect there to be some increases there. But first and foremost, daily parking and charging market rates.
How do most parking cash out programs work in your area?
Most people have a commute management tool like Loom or Ride Amigos or any of the latest great stuff to help leverage that. And they use some efficiencies with those commute management platforms to have it be automatic to the paycheck also. So it removes a lot of the burden from administrators or folks in HR or finance.
I'm curious, Olivia, you alluded to this in your answer previously about the culture and sort of like there's a competition for who has the best parking cash out. I'm curious to hear from both of you. What do you think the impact is of your policy just purely on the culture of employer TDM programs?
I can jump first. I think since Seattle's CTR law and since Commute Seattle leverages relationship building and trust and peer comparisons as a portion of that, we have a lot of like questions that come our way that's like, what is Amazon doing that we're not doing? Or how can we increase our options to be just in line with what those are? And I would say like at the end of the day, it's almost the bread and butter of the culture around the CTR law in Seattle. We're a pretty hyper competitive place as it is. And it's an opportunity that our city has to leverage and Commute Seattle has in how we articulate the program too. And the gamification piece and friendly competition or whatever you want to call it is really a great added benefit to our program.
And in DC, I know from talking to employers that people want to make the switch. A lot of employers are eager to reduce parking demand. They don't have enough supply. They'd like to have some cost savings. And I think the pre-tax transit benefits law was really fantastic because it just helped people understand a little bit more about transportation benefits. And this parking cash out provision in the new policy is a really good next logical step to help people take that next step in optimizing travel to their work site. And I'm sure some people will be resistant to it, but we have a lot of resources to help them. And one of the options is completely free and cost neutral to the employer, which is the TDM plan. Yes, it'll involve some staff time, but there is no other cost associated with that.
That was going to be one of my questions. Have you gotten any pushback from people yet? I know COVID, has affected the implementation of the program, but have you heard from anybody yet about any pushback to the new parking cash out law?
Well, we are still really early in the phase of implementing it, right? And our rulemaking hasn't been finalized yet. So I imagine that we'll have a lot more feedback in the next months. I know there were a lot of questions and some concerns from employers when the bill was reviewed and heard in City Council, but I think those were addressed through some of the provisions like exempting people who have parking garages or a campus plan and had already a TDM plan built into that campus plan. So we'll see. Yeah, it'll be interesting.
Any other questions from anyone in the meeting here?
Kirsty said that parking cash out is starting to pick up in Alexandria as well. They're trying it with hotels. They like the idea of it for a competitive advantage during peak tourism season.
Hi, it's Jillian Trinkus. I have a question for Olivia. I'm in Washington State and up in Whatcom County, which is north of Seattle. And I am curious if, we're at 30 years with the CTR law, what would you say are some ways that that law could be improved to take into account kind of new thinking around transportation? Yeah, so any thoughts you have on that?
Yeah, thanks for the question, Jillian, and good to see you, fellow Washingtonian. I think some things that we've been talking about most recently, I'm sure you're aware of in the technical committees that we have with the state here, but looking at the policy and how it can be inclusive of all trips and not just commute trips, specifically removing peak hour would be a big outcome I would like to see. Not all trips happen at peak hour, and the most amount of trips are less than a mile here, and they're not commute trips either. And so we're only hitting at a portion of them, of the trips at large in the community at large, with the policy itself being really focused on employers and their employees. An obvious one is the number of employees, and we have some folks already participating in our program voluntarily that don't meet the threshold. And so there's some sort of things we could tease out there to how to make it more accessible for more communities that aren't the largest employers here in the state of Washington. And the other piece of the policy itself is there's not a lot in the code that particularly calls out collecting data on vulnerable populations, which makes it hard to understand how to provide services that will work for them. And how to understand the communities. And so working that into the information demographics at the bare minimum, or working with the state around some partnerships to help do some cross-analyzing of what we know from CTR and what we know from the census, and how that can be kind of nested together. And then something else that I'll just add here is I would love to sort of flip CTR on its head and think about the start of the trip. And you as a residential area or working with residential multifamily housing, that's a big part of my background. And you can instill the behavior change from the origin. I do feel like we can make some great strides there, in something we haven't really approached too intimately here in the city of Seattle. We have many TDM policies that get at the development itself, but not for the residents after they occupy that building itself.
Thanks, Olivia. And I see Marnie, you have your hand raised, your virtual hand, so go ahead.
Yes, my virtual hand. Hi, this is Marnie Duke from the Portland, Oregon region. We're in the process of updating our CTR rule, which is an eco rule, and it's run through our DEQ. So it does have some limitations to it. A lot of our discussions have been around telework. Maybe if the presenters can talk a little bit about how telework is impacting their programs, if any. Our concerns here are that because our eco rule is 100 employees per work site, that now employers will say, well, with all my folks teleworking, or a large majority of my folks teleworking, we don't have to comply with this rule anymore. And also folks saying, well, because I have this certain percentage of folks teleworking, I have fulfilled all of our requirements for the eco rule. When we do the math, it actually could work out where employees are driving more often than they were pre-COVID. So I don't know, I just would love your thoughts on some of the things that you guys have been thinking on around telework.
You want to jump off with that, Marina?
Sure. Telework has been a complete boon for TDM in Washington, D.C. We have seen massive growth, obviously, in people teleworking, and the kind of inquiries we are receiving and the kind of help employers are seeking is also different. And that in turn has prompted us to alter a lot of the services that we offer to answer these new needs that employers have. And it's really wonderful to see so many employers implementing telework policies and upgrading their technology to allow employees to telework comfortably from their homes, right? In terms of the law, our goal is really to reduce single occupant vehicle trips. And if people are teleworking and that is translating to a positive impact in the employee commute survey that employers will be submitting, and they're attaining their goal of meeting that 75% non-SOV threshold, then we're all for it. That is a wonderful result, and it's something to support and encourage for sure. So the employee's location doesn't necessarily have a compliance effect. If the employee is a DC employee for that company, they would still be counted in that pool of like 20 or more employees for that employer. So they still need to comply in a way, but it will probably be easier for the employer to meet the threshold now that so many people are familiar and comfortable with teleworking.
I would agree with a lot of that, Marina, and that's how we're considering remote workers and a long time standing in the state of Washington, that a full-time remote worker is affected by the CTR law. And so again, I'm Olivia, I'm arriving at my work site. Today it happens to be in my bedroom. I got here at 6 to 9 a.m. and I work for a CTR affected employer, which means I need to tell you how I got to work. And today I removed a trip completely both ways. And again, that's great and definitely something to support. It's only one element though of category B. The subsidies are, I'm going to be category A and confusing them, but it's only one element out of a number of a menu of options. And so it's a way to become in compliance for sure. But I think too, not everyone has access to telework. And so it needs to be a part of your toolkit and options and your suite of what you're offering to employees. But we still have 150,000 transit riders on our system here in Seattle, and they've been riding it throughout the pandemic. And so I guess those are just some caveats with the nuance, but we do definitely include remote workers in the CTR law. You're still affected by that policy, and you're doing a great thing by eliminating that trip completely. I guess I'll just add, the state is thinking a lot, and it's a very hot topic, obviously, around what to do in the future and if they need to change language around telework and remote policy, or alter the goals. If telework, makes up a significant portion, should we have lower drive alone rate goals and vehicle mile travel goals because of the implications of that increase of telework? Thanks for the question, Marnie. Good to see you.
We maybe have time for one last question if anyone has one. If not, we can close it out here a few minutes early.
Thank you for joining us,
right.
everybody.
Yeah, thanks so much. We'll be doing a third one in this parking series in the next month or two, so stay tuned. And just very, very huge thanks to Olivia and Marina for presenting today. Really appreciate it and learned a lot from you both. Have a good lunch or evening, depending on which coast you're on. Bye, everybody.
Thanks,
everybody.
Thanks, everyone.